Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Backbone Podcast, the podcast where common sense still makes sense in a world that is sick and only getting sicker. And today, no one feels sicker than me and probably a legion of Inter fans after watching what was not probably, the worst final Champions League final in history. If you are not a soccer fan, today is probably the biggest day in probably in sports. I mean, over a billion, close to 2 billion people were watching this game today between PSG, the European champions, and Inter, a team that doesn't deserve to play with pub players. This game today was as embarrassing as it can get. You know, there are times when we see sporting events where teams they're just overmatched and the game is over before it started, and this was one of them. But Inter have talent. They have pretty good management. This score here, there is no excuse for this the score other than the fact that PSG were just light years ahead of Inter in every way, shape, or form. And you would have never have guessed that because people always say PSG, they play in the French league. French league is kind of like a one-team league. And, Inter played a more competitive league, Serie A. But today, PSG, for the first time in their history, are European champions. And they did it in just a total dominant fashion. Inter, the game was lost before the match even started. Inter looked shell-shocked from the beginning. This never looked close. It never looked competitive. What this reminded me of was when you see these 15-year-old boys, when they play these national team women and how the boys just utterly dominate these girls. They overmatch them. They overpower them. They outskill them. This is what happened today. You can't even say it was men against boys. It was men against girls. That's how bad it was. And there will be some big-time changes for Inter for sure. This will set the team back for many, many years. I don't believe that you can recover from such a devastating loss, and this will be used against Inter forever. You don't recover from these things. You try to move past it. You try to move on from it. But Milan fans, Juventus fans, Roma fans, I mean, they're all the teams that hate us, the fans that hate the Inter fans, the ultras, if you will. There will be banners, there will be songs, this will go on for 100 years. And for Inter to embarrass themselves like this, they didn't just embarrass themselves. They embarrassed the badge. They embarrassed the fans. And frankly, they embarrassed Italian football. They embarrassed the entire league with this. I can't even call it a performance. They just didn't show up. And PSG had a 2-0 lead at halftime, and then they just continue to pour it on in the second half with 3 more goals. And this will be cannon fodder this will be ammunition forever. You don't ever escape this. So yeah, that's where I am today. Another weekend ruined by Inter. And years ago, I would have been distraught. I probably wouldn't have been able to do this podcast today. Had I been in my 20s, I would have probably been in Munich where the game took place. But I used to get my heart broken, wrenched out by these teams. But now, I'm older, and I just, these guys, they don't even care. I remember going to a game where Inter lost a terrible, terrible game. They lost the championship because of it. And I remember going out to a nightclub. Friends of mine wanted to take me out. And we were in Rome where Inter had played, and there were 3 Inter fans dancing with girls at a nightclub there. And they had just lost the championship. And I said to myself, why is my stomach in knots? Why am I heartbroken when these guys, they don't give a shit? And that's what today's athlete, especially today's athlete, they don't give a shit. As long as they make their money, they don't care. And so, you just take the heat from your soccer buddies, and I have them all over the world, and I'm getting the business in about 20 different languages, so I have to use my Google Translate to be able to read how Inter taken in the ass, and they want how how I should be taking long objects and or my orifices. But today there was no competitive balance here. PSG's game plan was tremendous. I don't even think they needed a game plan. They just outclassed Inter in every facet of the way, technically, tactically, physically, and emotionally. Donnarumma, who is an Italian goalkeeper, he's now two-thirds of the way to the trifecta. He won the Euro with the Italian national team. He now has won a Champions League, and he just needs to win a World Cup. And I don't know about this Italian team. They can't even qualify for the World Cup most of the time. We'll see if that's in the plans for him. He's very young. He's 25, 26, so he's got a long career to go. But Inter just were not in this game at all today. This was as decisive of a hiding as it gets. And Inzaghi, their manager, who I think is a pretty good manager. I don't think it's necessarily his fault. They just didn't seem to have a game plan today. They didn't seem to have any legs. I'm not making any excuses for him. I don't know what happened. They just it seemed like there was one team who was deserved to be there, and an Inter team that were heroic against Barcelona in the greatest semifinal in Champions League history. That team didn't show up for the 90 minutes today, and it was evident from the start. They just were out of sorts. They were shell shocked from minute one, and so it goes. PSG are the champions of Europe. They are owned by one of these Saudi groups or Qatar groups, or I think it's Qatar, the Qatari royal family. So they have endless amounts of money that they can spend. They could spend billions if they wanted to. There are some restrictions, but they can. And they are now poised with a very young team to go on a run. And as we say this, as I lament and rant about my team's ineptitude, I was seeing images of Paris literally about 2 minutes ago, where you have not Parisians, but people from other parts of the world living in Paris who have invaded Paris, who are setting that beautiful city on fire. It is absolute madness in that city right now. That people they think of an excuse to destroy property and to destroy a city, to burn down a city just because their team wins a championship. That's kind of counterproductive, don't you think? But this is the mentality. This is the animalistic mentality of these people. So there it is. It was a game that was as one-sided as it gets. And Inter did not show any type of plan. They didn't show any type of tactical any sort of game plan going. I mean, they were changing formations on the field. They started with their typical 3-5-2. Then they went to a 2-3-5 because they couldn't just handle the width of PSG. They just seemed out of sorts today. And I've gone through this before. This is now the second final in 3 years Inter have lost, and this is kind of a old hat to me now. I'm kind of used to it, but I don't get upset by it anymore. I just, once the first goal went in, I kind of knew it was over. When the second goal went in 8 minutes later, I just, what can you say? I'm actually speechless. I could not believe that this happened. And this is the first time in Champions League history and the first time in European Cup since the 1960s, so over 60 years ago, that 5 goals have been scored in a final. This is the most lopsided final in Champions League history by far. And of course, it has to be my Inter team. And that just goes to prove that God must be a woman. I must have been a Nazi in a previous life to have all these crazy, terrible sports things. My life is pretty good. But the important stuff, family is healthy, happy, doing very, very well. But just with this stupid sports stuff, I just can't catch a break sometimes. I can't. Nobody wants to see me happy, I guess. But Inter just showed no fight at all. They just looked scared. They looked tired. They looked listless, and they just looked like they didn't want to be there. And my trained eye in watching all these games for over 40 years now, you can almost tell when a team they just don't give a shit. They don't care. They've packed it in already. And this is what Inter seemed to be doing today. It was a sad, sad display. They humiliated, like I said, they humiliated the fans. See, the players don't care because these players, they go to different teams all the time, so they don't give a shit. Half the Inter players will probably be gone next year, and nobody's going to bust their balls about losing a Champions League final 5-0. The ball busting will happen to the fans. Every time an Inter fan rolls into a city, somebody's going to put up 5-0. And that's what the owners don't understand. That's what the players don't understand. That's what the media doesn't understand. It's the fan, short for fanatic, that suffers the most. The players, they get over it. They're going to get their check. They're going to go on vacation. They're going to have their 2 or 3 girlfriends on a boat somewhere in Monaco. They'll forget all about this in 48 hours. The fans will never, ever forget. And today, Inter showed no spirit at all. Their midfield was gone. They had no midfield today. Their defense, Cherby and Bastoni. Bastoni played like a warrior, but he just couldn't handle the wave of pressure that PSG were putting on them. Sommer, this is not his fault. I mean, the shots were coming from every direction. The midfield was a disaster. DeMarco, I'm not going to blame it all on him, but he didn't really play well. And the front, the Thuram and Martinez didn't give Donnarumma any trouble at all. There was one shot, I think, in the 40th minute that Thuram almost had a header that came close to going in. But so what? It would have been 5-1 instead of 5-0. But Inter they didn't show up. They didn't have any tactical awareness today. Technically, they were off. They were passed. They were giving the ball away. The possession game was, I think, 63-37. They couldn't connect passes. They couldn't hold on to the ball. They just seemed, again, like they didn't belong there. They just seemed like they were just so overmatched that they just wanted to get out of there. And the most embarrassing part, outside of the fact that they were run off the field and had 5 goals put on them, is that the referee didn't even give extra time. At the end, soccer matches are usually 90 minutes, and they always, because of injuries or because of, substitutions, they add on 2-3 minutes at the end of the game. Here, 90 minutes, he called the game, and that's humiliating. That's just as humiliating. And for some of you who are not soccer fans, who don't watch soccer and say, well, 5-0, we've seen that before. In baseball, in soccer, 5 goals doesn't really happen that much. This score line is an anomaly. It doesn't happen all the time, especially in a final like this. Never happens. But let's just say if this was a baseball game, 5-0 in soccer is the equivalent to probably like 15-0 in baseball. And in football, it'll probably be closer to like 49-55-0 in football. This would be like a 40-point win in basketball. 5-0 in soccer just does not happen. And it doesn't happen with a team that has the type of prowess that Inter have. Inter were a pretty good team this year. They were a month ago. We were talking about them winning the treble, and if you don't know what the treble is, that means that they win the Champions League, the league itself, the Serie A Italian league, and the Interleague Cup, which would be the Coppa Italia, which is the least important of the three. But a month ago, they were talking about winning all three of these, and now they come up empty-handed. Now they come up empty-handed, just like 2 years ago. And when teams get these type of shellackings like Inter got today, big changes usually come. Now, the thing is, in Serie A, the problem with Italian football is that it doesn't have all that much money. So their resources are limited. PSG, I think their team, they spend over 780 million euros on that team, which is about almost like $900 million here, which is an unfathomable amount of money to spend on a team. No American sports team does that. They don't have the capability of doing it. They don't have the type of owners. They don't have Qatari royalty owning their teams. Whereas Inter, on the other hand, spent about 300 million, which is the most in Serie A, but it's nothing compared to what these English, Spanish, or these oil-rich teams are spending now. So Inter put a lot of they got to where they got through smoke and mirrors. They have some pretty good players, but not great players. They have a very good coach, but not a great head coach or manager, whatever you want to call him. And it showed today. They were not able to string passes together. They were not able to develop a flow to the game. They never got to enjoy possession of the game, so they could ease into it and kind of blend in and get everybody involved. They just seem to be kicking the ball back to PSG every time they on the rare occasion when they get possession of the ball. And I mean kicking the ball, not passing the ball. Their touches were off. They were heavy-footed. They just seemed nervous, and they just couldn't contain with PSG's press or their speed or their athleticism or their youth. That's the other problem with Italian football. Inter, there was a stat today that I read that I just couldn't believe, that on the starting 11 of Inter's team, not one player was born in the 21st century. All their players were born in the 20th century, whereas half of the PSG players were all born in the 21st century. Their average age, I think, was 24, whereas Inter's average age was over 31. And in Italian football, if you know anything about Italian football, they are the worst at developing young players properly. They bury these young players in the lower leagues, Serie B, Serie G, and they just make them wait for years until they give them a shot at the senior league. They will buy secondary foreign players or try to get them on the cheap, and they'll play them on the big teams, but they won't play the younger Italian players. And the irony is that the under-17 Inter they call them Primaveras, the under-17 team for Inter won the European Championship this weekend, today. PSG have two guys on their team, I think three guys, that are under 20. And you would never see that in Italian football. If Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, the two of the greatest professional athletes I've ever seen, if they were Italian, you wouldn't have known their names until they were about 26, 27. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. They will keep any player down. It's the Italian mentality. We talked about being closed-minded yesterday. This is a closed-minded mentality that doesn't work anymore. This is a game that is getting younger and younger and younger. If you're 30 years old, you are old. In the NFL, if a 28, 29, 30-year-old quarterback is in his prime, that's when he knows the league and everything slows down for him. You're 30 years old in football or in soccer, you're old. Because there's a 20-year-old kid, there's an 18-year-old kid that is coming to take your job, and he's better than you, he's faster than you, he's hungrier than you, he's not making the type of money you're making. And Inter have a lot of old guys. Their midfield is they had 2 midfielders, one is 36, one is 32. That's old when you're when they have to chase around guys who are 18, 19 years old and fast and athletic. But the Italian mentality will never change because Italy has this, uh, I hate to say this, they have this nostalgia, this resting on their laurels disease, where they talk about the past and they admire the past, and they should. Italy has, in my humble opinion, the greatest culture in the history of the world. I mean, they created Western civilization, the Romans, and their culture is the envy of the world. Really, nobody else had a Renaissance. Nobody else had the Roman Empire. Nobody had the Etruscans. Nobody has the influence in music and art and culinary. No matter what Stanley Tucci says, being that he thinks everything comes from another place like the Middle East or Africa, which is nonsense. And it's great to have that. It's great to have that culture to fall back on. It's great to have those traditions and that history, but you got to evolve. And that's not what Italy likes to do. They don't like change. They don't want to evolve. It's like, well, we'll worry about it when it happens. And then things like this happen. And people say, well, how could this happen to us? Well, it happened because you're playing 20th century football against a team that is playing in the 21st century. Your mentality is old. Your players are old. Your tactics are old. And yes, it'll get you to a final. Yes, it'll get you to a semifinal. Yes, occasionally you will win a trophy once every 10, 15 years. I mean, it's been 15 years since an Italian team has won the Champions League. And they all have the same mentality. So I can't be wrong. If it's one team, then okay, it's not everybody, but not everybody but one. But when it's every team that is going up against these English, Spanish, French teams now, and they're just getting embarrassed, you have to start looking inward and saying we have to change something. And the way to change it, number one, I always say, is limit the amount of foreign players you have in your league. Bring up these 17, 18, 19-year-old kids and give them a chance to play. What's the big deal? They're only going to get better with experience. But that's not the Italian way. And so today, as I rant to you, as I felt like throwing up 5 times, we say goodbye to a very strange season of the Champions League format. Doesn't work for me. They've added so many teams, it's a disaster. Now we're going to go into the World Club Cup this summer, which, I mean, these guys just don't have a break. A lot of these guys are injured. They won't be able to recover in time for next season, which starts in the middle of August. But it's always about money. And next year, of course, the United States, Mexico, and Canada host the World Cup. So football will be right in our backyard here if you're in the United States or Canada or Mexico. So it should be fun. But today, PSG absolutely dominate my Inter, and I will never hear the end of this. This will be something that I'm going to go home to God and with this final. Now, again, if it's going to ruin my day, no, it's nothing that a few hits of Jack doesn't cure. But in a fun way, people are going to bust my balls about it forever. It's just what it is. You want to delve into sports, you got to deal with the good, and then you definitely got to deal with the bad. So, anywho, I just wanted to do this Champions League final post game Requiem. PSG once again champions of Europe for the first time in a thoroughly dominating 5-0 victory over my Inter, and there will be no man memo because there were no men on the Inter side today. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you enjoyed the game. It was really, really hard to do that because it was just so one-sided. But Thank you again for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Be careful out there, gentlemen. Satan is always busy. He was really busy today. He was laughing his ass off at me. Be a man. Have a backbone, because masculinity and common sense are worth standing up for. We'll see you later.